Welcome to Bring the World Home, a production of the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Hawaii. In every program, we meet with a volunteer to discuss that person's experiences in the Peace Corps, and we bring the world home. With us today, we have Christiane Connors, who served in Gabon from 2003 to April of 2005. She's just came home. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mary.
Christiane, tell us where Gabon is on the globe.
Gabon is the equator runs right through Gabon, and it's in Central Africa on the western coast.
And so if we were to take this and go back to Hawaii, we're way, way, way back here.
Correct.
Okay, so we're across the world in Gabon.
A 12-hour difference.
A 12-hour difference. Okay, so 12 hours ahead of us or behind us?
Ahead.
Ahead. Okay, well that must have been kind of fun to know you're always ahead of your family, huh?
Yeah, the Gabonese got a kick out of it when I'd say, well, it's exactly 1 o'clock in the morning where I'm come from, so.
Tell me a little bit about your experiences in Gabon. First of all, where were you?
I was in my first year, I was in Bakumba. Well, excuse me, the first 3 months we did in-country training in Kulamutu, a town in the center of the country. Then I was assigned to Bakumba, which is in the southeastern part of the country, just an hour from the Congo border. And then my second year, I was in Mayumba, which was on the coast, on the beach, in the western part of the country.
Oh, so I take it you liked the second one better because of the beach part, or not?
Actually, my first post was, that was my best year. I really enjoyed the community, and both communities were great, but I really formed some close friendships in my first community in Bakumba.
When I was in the Peace Corps, once I got to my post, I stayed there. I didn't move. I stayed in the same town, and I was in Senegal, by the way, so not too far away in terms of the world globe here. But I stayed in my village, and I didn't move on to another one. Why did you move on?
I moved because my postmate, the other volunteer who was posted with me, she became a Peace Corps leader in another city in the country. And I was given the option of staying in Bakumba or going to another site where there'd be another volunteer, because Bakumba was isolated, and because they closed down since I've been home, they've closed down the program in Gabon, so they did not send another group of volunteers. So I elected to change post to where another volunteer would be.
How was that for leaving your first post, which you said you liked a lot, and going to a second one? Was it kind of like starting over?
Yeah, I would not recommend it. Actually, that was the most challenging part of my Peace Corps experience, was having to, I mean, when I moved, it was essentially doing my first year over again. Cultural integration, getting to know the town, mapping and doing needs assessments, and it was too much. And on hindsight, if I had to do it over again, I would have stayed in Bakumba. But
okay, so Bakumba was how far away from, what is the capital? Is it Libreville?
It's Libreville.
Okay, and I know that's a fairly sizable city.
Correct.
And you said that Bakumba was a fairly remote, was it a village or a town, or how far was that from Libreville?
It was far. It was on the other side of the country, and you could take a train, the Trans-Gabon Railroad, which runs from Libreville to Franceville, which was where Bakumba was near. So yeah, Bakumba was in the farthest corner possible from Libreville. Bakumba was interesting because it was an old mining town. Comilag, which is a French magnesium company, operated there, and there's a big pulley system between Congo and Bakumba. And by the time I arrived, Comilag had left, and it was very similar to old mining towns that you'd find in West Virginia, here in the States.
Now, what did you do in the Peace Corps?
My primary project was teaching English as a foreign language. So I was in the middle and secondary school.
How many students did you teach?
Classes ranged from no fewer than 50 students, and the class size could be up to 80 students.
I dream along, or rap one.
Of the earth and every is we will watch on the list of how many kids and of such I dream of. Next one, read the book.
We're black or white, whatever has been. We share the bounties of the earth. And a very man is free. We're watching next week on his head. It said, enjoy life the world, and then the need of an account of such I been at home.
So you were teaching English. Why were you teaching English? What did they need to know English for in the first place?
That's, you know, the whole goal of Peace Corps is sustainable development. And I battled with that a lot because I felt that teaching English wasn't a very sustainable development project. But after 2 years, I think that was one of the best Peace Corps programs that they had running in Gabon because the students want to learn English. If the students, the test to go into high school, if they could pass that, then they would take the BAC to get into university. So English was very important. Why do you like English?
I like English because I want to be ambassador of English.
Oh, good. Where do you want to go as ambassador?
Go to USA.
Very good.
So in order to get into high school, they had to know English, even though this was a former French colony, and I would imagine they spoke many different languages in that part of Gabon being relatively isolated, right? So I still don't know why they'd even need English.
Well, it's a French system, and the French system, you need English. It's just as important as mathematics or science or French course. So English was very important, and already Gabon suffers from a real teacher shortage. In fact, 80% of the teachers in Gabon right now, teaching at the lycée and collège level, they are expatriates. They come from other African countries to work in Gabon. So it was a really something if a school could get a native English speaker to teach English.
So. What were your living conditions like in your first post?
My first post, I was in a nice cement house. Like I said, it was a former mining town. So they had some very nice housing that never belonged to the Gabonese, but belonged to the French. So I had a considerably large house. My second year, I was in a very small house, in really a wooden shack without running water. I did have electricity, but I shared a communal pump with the rest of the community.
Was that hard to go to from having, I assume, living in the lap of luxury in your first assignment in a house with electricity and running water? And did you have an internet connection? Or
no,
not in your house. Okay.
The change actually was very easy. I don't like house cleaning, and if you're in a nice house, I had tiles, and I didn't like mopping, and it was much easier taking care of a cement floor.
Okay. So when you went to the second house, did you live by yourself, or did you live with the other volunteer?
No, I lived by myself.
You lived by yourself. Was it in, I know that in some communities they have, you try to live either with a host family or near a group of people and maybe a smaller community in a compound or something like that. How are you set up?
Well, my first 3 months for the in-country training, I was living with a host family, and I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that experience. And in fact, when I made the decision to leave Bakumba, I was also considering going back to Kulamutu, where I was doing my training, and living once again with my host family. So I think living with a host family is the best way of getting into a culture, and I would say I learned the most during those 3 months about the Gabonese when I was living
That's
with the family.
wonderful. I know when I was in the Peace Corps, we didn't live with host families. We immediately went into whatever our living situation was going to be. In this particular case, for me, I was with another Peace Corps volunteer, and we shared a rather small dwelling. But I know that that's not the case always, and particularly in the training. It makes sense to me. What did you in those 3 months? And what is it that, if you could think about one thing that was maybe the most important to you in your acclimation to Gabon with your host family, what would that be?
Just waking up every morning and coming out and having French bread and coffee with them, coming home for lunch, sharing the meals. That was the most important aspect of it. And just really being right in the community. They're much more willing to accept me. The Gabonese have a reputation of being a very closed group of people and very suspicious of foreigners, even people outside their own ethnic groups. And I mean, well, the Gabonese are the original forest people. They really do come from the Central African rainforest, from the pygmy groups. And so that's kind of where they got this reputation. And for a long time, very little was known about Gabon. So I think that stereotype or reputation of the Gabonese as being a very guarded and closed group of people is accurate to some extent. So it was, especially in Gabon, very important to have a positive host family experience. Because when you went into your community, you're more isolated. You weren't right in the center of the community as you were when you were living with the family. It kind of prepared you for that experience.
Now you mentioned in the one post it was a former mining community, and so I assume that a lot of the people had worked for the mines that lived in the community. What did they do afterwards?
Well, yes, the entire town was employed by this mining company. When the mining company left, they actually converted much of about a couple hundred acres of land around the area into a private park. And it was kind of a bizarre park. You could drive through and you could see impalas, which aren't even native to Gabon, but you could also see chimpanzees and mandrills. Gabon is famous for mandrills.
What's a mandrill?
It's the ape-like animal. It's an ape it's a monkey with the colorful bottom, colorful rear end, and a very decorative face. But does have a flaming red bottom, so that's how most people know a mandrill.
Okay.
But you could, they had a suspension bridge, one of the largest suspension bridges certainly in Africa. It was 1/4 mile long, and you could cross this bridge and see the animals. It was interesting though, it was a private park for tourists, and when I was there, I went about 3 or 4 times because it was a lot of fun to get out. But few people in Bukumba, in the community, had ever been there. All the men worked there, but not few of my children, of my students or the children who lived near us had ever been to the park.
That's kind of
It's
junk.
terrible.
It's right there in the middle of
it was
their
too
area,
expensive.
and they can't even go enjoy something in the backyard.
We tried to once arrange to get a discount if we could bring some of my students into the park, and it was terrible. They wouldn't even compromise on that. And in terms of tourist volume, no one was ever there. The hotel was a remnants of the colonial past, and you walk in and big colonial bar. It was a beautiful hotel, but no tourist and very unfriendly to the supporting town.
What about your second post? What is the name?
Mayumba.
Mayumba. In Mayumba, what was the main source of income? Again, few people were really employed. It would be
if you could find employment with the petroleum companies, Gabon is the ninth wealthiest country in Africa, and it's primarily due to oil. And Perenco, Shell, there are a number of companies that drill offshore as well as inland. And if you could find a job with an oil company, you're pretty well set. But that right now, a lot of oil companies, a lot of the wells were being shut down when I was there, and
They're being shut down with all of the shortage of oil around the
Yeah.
rest of the world. Isn't that interesting?
Well, for the past 20 years, Gabon's been exporting their oil, and right now, you know, their estimates everywhere from 4 years to 10 years that soon it'll all be dry. But it's you know, I was there in Gabon when it was on the downslide. Gabon is a very politically stable country. That's why few people have heard of Gabon, because although it's right next to the Congo, you know, there haven't been many problems
I was
there.
reading, I was looking in the internet in preparation for our visit today, and looking at Gabon, and the same president has been in office for some unbelievable long
37
time,
years,
37 years. President Bongo, is that his name? How is there?
President El Haj Omar Odimba Bongo, yeah.
Okay, what? How could he stay in office for so long?
Easily. You know, he entered office just as Omar, I think it was President Albert Bernard Bongo. He was a good Catholic. Then when oil was discovered off the coast in Gabon, he mysteriously changed his name after several deals to El Haj Omar Odimba Bongo. So he was, and he converted to Islam. So he's a
So
now he's a
that's the
good
El
Muslim.
Haj.
But yeah, so he runs a tight ship, and it's primarily due to the success, the wealth of Gabon. Few people outside the capital sees that money. It really stays in the top 5 or 6% of the population.
So the other 94% of the population, what are their living conditions? Would you consider that they were living in poverty, or were they comfortable, or what would the case be?
The Libreville is a beautiful town. Half hour out of it, the roads are terrible. The interior, there are no roads. They're just they're all dirt roads, and during the rainy season, sometimes impassable. And the living conditions for most of the Gabonese are still very, very rough.
Sure. What about when you were knowing that you were leaving, and I understand that that the Peace Corps is closing down in Gabon. Was that a sadness for you? I mean, you're one of the final groups of volunteers being in this country. How was that for you when leaving? Just a short, was it about 2 months ago, 3 months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real mixed feelings. I experienced several highs and lows in Gabon. From one aspect, it's too bad, because Gabon had the Peace Corps had a great legacy in Gabon. They've been there for about 30 years since the beginning of Peace Corps, and they've done a lot of work. From the other perspective, you know, my program was teaching English as a foreign language, and personally, I feel that it was a little too much to ask of a volunteer, in the sense that I was a young, single, white female teaching these students who are not used to, first of all, having a woman teacher. Teaching is a male profession. Certainly not a young teacher, and a foreigner. French isn't my first language, so it was really challenging. And when I look back at it, I'm so glad I did Peace Corps, and I'm glad I stuck through. But I really question whether maybe it just might be too much for volunteers. And in our TEFL group, over 60% of our group left after the first year, and primarily because of abuse from students. And the teaching system is so different there. The male teachers really take advantage of a lot of the students. All the male professors have copines
Sure.
who are students, and that was really difficult to have these colleagues who are, I was working with them and had friendly relationships with them, but then also to see these young girls, 15, 16, 17 years old, being forced to have sex with them if they want to keep their grades up, or if they wanted money, and it was tough for the girls to say no. And at the time, the girls who confided in me, I was shocked at their acceptance of the situation, their tolerance. But now when I look back at it, I realize those girls were just trying to survive the best how they knew how to survive, even in spite of the risk of catching AIDS or other STDs. So
It must have been really hard.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
And actually another challenging part is the treatment of the students, and punishment. Physical punishment is the norm in Gabon. It wasn't uncommon to see teachers taking turns and whipping a student in front of others, to put students on their knees in the hot sun and on the gravel. And Peace Corps volunteers, we didn't punish our students like that, and in a sense that hurt us because the students knew they could get away with a lot.
You know, we're almost out of time. I wanted to take a quick minute to look at what you brought with you today. If you could show our viewing audience this carving and explain it, and then we need to wrap up because we're just about out of time.
It's a mask. Masks are a very popular form of art there. And the fellow who made this, Simon Miseret, he's a pygmy and kind of the last of the Mohican in terms of making this style of
it's a
mask.
beautiful piece, and I know that it's a female piece versus a male piece, and it's because of the way the legs are. We have to wrap up now, and I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate your being on our program so much. I know that you're newly back from the Peace Corps, and that it's difficult with adjusting on returning to Hawaii. And there's a good Peace Corps association here, the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Hawaii. Please check them out and get to know some people. And I want to say to our viewing audience, thank you for joining us and bringing the world home. Aloha.
While living and working abroad, far from home, I often debated with myself why I was in Gabon. I sometimes doubted whether my community wanted my help or whether my efforts would be fruitless in the end. 2 years later, and I'm home for good. However, my thoughts still linger in Gabon, and I'm nostalgic for a way of life that once seemed so foreign, but now seems so right. My time there was meaningful and worthwhile. Ultimately, it taught me that if I want to make an impact on the world, first, I must allow the world to impact me.